Okay, when I first watched that, one hotel instantly came to mind. The Holiday Inn in Amana, Iowa. I never stayed here, but so many people that have said that it was genuinely one of the creepiest experiences they've ever had. And the main reason is because it's the site of an unsolved double murder in 1980, where two people were brutally bludgeoned to death with a hatchet in their hotel beds. Their killer was never found, but so many things about this case are bizarre, starting with the fact that they only got the room out of pure luck because the hotel had initially been sold out. So they were the very last ones to get their room keys for the entire night. The killer wrote one word on the back of their bathroom door that only said, quote, "this." End quote. And possibly the most insane detail of all is that at the time of the murders, the hotel was full of morticians because there was a mortician convention taking place in the area. There's a lot to unpack in this case, and it's scary to think that some people check into hotels, but some never leave. This is the disturbing murders of Rose Burkert and Roger Atkinson. If you want to lose sleep tonight, stick around and let's talk about it, because their killer could still be out there. This is Rose Burkert. She lived in St. Joseph, Missouri, and was only 22 years old when her life tragically ended. Rose was a nurse trainee at St. Joseph's Hospital, and she was also a mom to a 2-year-old little girl who she loved very much. The father of this child was never in the picture, so Rose took on the single mom life and poured all of herself into her daughter. Everyone who knew her said that she was the best mom, but deep down, she always wanted to meet someone and fall in love. Fast forward to June of 1980. This is when she meets Roger Atkinson, a 32-year-old man who also lived in St. Joseph, Missouri. Roger served in the U.S. Navy, but at the time, he was working as a telephone installer/repairman. Rose met Roger one summer day in 1980 when he came to her house to install a telephone. And ever since then, they really hit it off. The bad part? Roger was married to someone else, and had been for 7 years. Rose knew, as did all of Roger's coworkers and friends, but he had married his high school sweetheart, Marcella. It seemed like Roger and Marcella had a good relationship up until June of that year, right around the time he met Rose. He and Marcella had tried having a baby, but were struggling with fertility, so this caused some turmoil in their marriage. By all accounts, though, things seemed okay. Marcella said they were your typical American family who worked hard, trying to save for a house and start a family. They spent a lot of time in church together, so she had no idea that her husband was hiding such a dark secret of having an affair. That is, until the unthinkable happened. This brings us to September 8th, 1980. This was the last time Marcella saw her husband alive. Roger told her that he had to go out of town for work for the next 2 weeks and that he wasn't going to have any time off, not even on the weekends. Little did Marcella know, but he was actually going to meet up with Rose and spend time with her. She last spoke with Roger over the phone 2 days later, and at that point, everything seemed normal. Rose left her daughter with one of her closest friends named Shirley, and then she took off for Cahoga, Missouri to meet up with Roger. The two stayed at a hotel and checked in under the name Mr. and Mrs. Roger Burkert. They stayed at this hotel for 2 days, and then they drove Rose's car to the Holiday Inn in Amana, Iowa, again using the same name for this reservation. This hotel is in rural Iowa along Interstate 80 near Williamsburg, and usually it's not super busy, but that night, it was. When Rose and Roger walked into the hotel, the front desk employee told them that the hotel was actually completely sold out because there was a mortician convention in the area, and a lot of the morticians were actually staying in the hotel. So the couple started to make their way out the door, but just as they were about to leave, the front desk employee stopped them and said that he had just refreshed his screen, and it looked like there had been one cancellation. He said it was their lucky night, and at 7:40 p.m., they got the key to the last room in the entire hotel, room 260. Room 260 was located in the very back of the hotel on the opposite side of the lobby. After getting settled in the room, Rose used the phone to call her friend Shirley and check in on her daughter, but Shirley missed the call and didn't answer. About 30 minutes later, Shirley tried calling Rose back, but the phone just rang and rang. No one answered, and what happened after this has never been explained. So around noon the next day, the hotel's housekeepers started making their rounds to clean the rooms. Checkout time at this location is at 11 a.m., so guests should be out of their rooms by now. As the housekeeper walks up to room 260, she can still hear the TV playing inside. She tries knocking and calling out to the guests to see if they will open up the locked door so that she can start cleaning, but she got no response. So the housekeeper goes to the front desk to talk to the manager on duty, and it's there that she sees that Rose and Roger have failed to physically check out of their room. The manager gives the housekeeper the master key to unlock the door herself, and when she does, she immediately sees their feet on the bed. The housekeeper initially thought they were still sleeping, so she quietly goes deeper into the room. But this is where she discovers a horrifying scene. Blood spattered everywhere, on the headboard, dripping down the walls, soaked into the bedding and carpet, and laying side by side, face down on the bed, was Rose and Roger, very clearly deceased. So the housekeeper slams the door shut and runs to the manager, who then goes to look for himself. After seeing the blood-soaked room, they immediately call the police. When authorities arrive, they found that Rose and Roger had been brutally bludgeoned to death with a hatchet. The back of their skulls had been slashed and caved in from repeated blows, and they each sustained multiple wounds. Rose had 12 hatchet wounds to her face, head, and throat, and Roger suffered 7 blows to his arms, face, head, and neck. Roger was found with his arms up and bent at the elbow, and several of his fingers had been severed, meaning that he put up a fight against his killer. It looked as though he was trying to protect his head from the hatchet, which had a 3.5-inch blade. Missing from the scene was the murder weapon itself, but what investigators did find only posed more questions. So the hotel room itself looked like a mess. All of their belongings had been scattered about like someone was rifling through it all looking for something. But the weirdest part is that the hotel room showed no sign of forced entry. Then, investigators found 2 hotel chairs pushed up and sitting next to Roger's side of the bed, almost as if their killer sat there talking to them before killing them. Draped over the chair was a bathroom towel, and on the floor next to the bed was the contents of Roger's wallet. His ID and all of his cards were strewn about, and it's been reported that someone took $200 from his wallet. But this gets even stranger, because evidence was found that the killer put his feet up on the desk in the hotel room after butchering Rose and Roger. What for? No one knows, but I can guess 2 possible reasons. One was that the killer wanted to admire what he'd just done. Or 2, and more realistically, was that he was overly tired from killing Rose and Roger. The act of killing someone in this way is very physical, and investigators described it as overkill. As investigators were examining the scene, they found something else that was odd. Little fragments of soap all over the floor. The killer, at some point, walked around the room and carved a bar of soap, leaving little shavings all over the place. Then investigators made their way into the bathroom, and it somehow gets even stranger. So the bathroom sink had been stained with blood, as if the killer used it to clean themselves off after the murders. Inside the sink was a towel completely soaked with blood, and authorities were able to pull a sample of unidentified male DNA from this towel, which likely belongs to the killer. They were also able to pull a partial fingerprint off an item belonging to Rose. But what I'm about to say is probably the creepiest detail of all. Investigators found a tube of Crest toothpaste sitting on the bathroom counter, but it was empty. The killer, for some unknown reason, squeezed all of the toothpaste into the bathtub. And keep this detail in your mind because it plays a bigger part in the story later on. And if that isn't creepy enough for you, here's this. The killer then took a bar of soap and wrote one word on the back of the bathroom door. It was only visible with direct light being flashed on it, but it said, quote, "This." End quote. Now, no one knows what this means, but it's really disturbing given the circumstances. So now that the entire crime scene was examined, the medical examiner was brought in to hopefully give some sort of answer. According to them, both Rose and Roger died from major blood loss and severe brain injuries from the hatchet. But there was no evidence of SA on either of them, nor were drugs or alcohol found in their system. Rose was fully clothed when found, and Roger was only in his boxer shorts. So naturally, a massive investigation and search for this killer was underway, but this case proved to be incredibly perplexing. The main question was, who would do this and why? Like, what could the motive have been? Investigators started looking for witnesses, but essentially no one heard or saw anything, which I find weird because this was a very gruesome and brutal crime, and this hotel was sold out. It's weird to me that not one single neighbor or anyone in the surrounding rooms heard anything. Not a yell, not a thump, not a scream, just nothing. And no one saw anything weird either. The hotel room itself was only accessible from inside the building. It did have a window, but there was no balcony, and no evidence was found that the window was ever opened. So So this leaves only one point of entry, the hotel room door. Since there was no sign of forced entry, this has led many people to wonder whether it was someone Rose or Roger knew, or if it could have been a hotel employee with a master key card. One of the most unsettling aspects of this case that no one can explain is this. Police found that 3 phone calls were connected to room 260 the night of the murder. 2 of them were accounted for, one being the unanswered call that Rose made shortly after checking in to check on her daughter. The second being her friend calling the room back, which also went unanswered. But no one knows what the third call was about or who it was from. We don't know whether it was Rose or Roger trying to call someone, or their killer trying to make a phone call, or if it was someone else entirely trying to call their room. But I feel like if we could ever somehow figure out who called that night, it would be a massive clue in this case, and it could crack it wide open. Although we know exactly how Rose and Roger died, we still don't know who killed them or why. But over the years, there have been a few theories as to who could have been responsible. Theory number 1 is Rose's ex-boyfriend, Danny Burton. Rose kicked Danny out months earlier for his drug use, but he was reportedly stalking her in the months before she was killed. It got so bad that she even got a dog for protection. But one night, she came home to find her dog dead, butchered and hanging from her house. Danny was also super controlling and abusive, so after this, she went to the police to file a complaint and tried to get a restraining order. Rose even told authorities that if she ever ended up dead, it would be because of Danny. Now, Roger's wife, Marcella, also believes it could have been Danny. So first off, it was a huge shock to learn that her husband had been murdered, let alone that he had been cheating on her. She only found out because he died, which is so traumatic. But according to Marcella, she began piecing everything together and going back to all the times that Roger had been acting weird. She said that he started acting weird in June, which is when he met Rose, so that makes sense. But literally right before he died, they went on a trip to Branson to celebrate 7 years of marriage together. They camped out for most of the trip, but one night they decided to splurge and get a hotel room. Roger did something that night that now feels like a clue or at least some sort of red flag. Roger was acting a little bit paranoid, and he put one of the hotel's chairs underneath the doorknob to their room, which stops anyone from barging through the door. This was confusing because he had never done that before, but when Marcella asked him about it, he just shrugged it off and said it was no big deal. But this has made her question whether or not he was scared that Rose's ex, Danny, was stalking him too. But oddly enough, police interviewed Danny, and not only did he have a solid alibi the night of the murders, but he also took and passed a polygraph test, so nothing ever came of this theory. Theory/suspect number 2 was Marcella herself. If police were looking just at motive, it's easy to say that Marcella would have a good one. I mean, her husband of 7 years was cheating on her, and it's been reported that Rose may not have even been the first one that he cheated with. Sources say that almost everyone, aside from Marcella, knew that Roger was cheating. Even their pastor, who Roger confided in shortly before being murdered. After news broke that he was killed, their pastor visited Marcella and admitted that he too knew about the affair. He just wasn't sure how to approach the situation. But he also said that Roger grew incredibly attached to Rose's daughter, which really devastated Marcella because she was struggling with infertility. She so badly wanted to have a child with Roger, it just never worked out. Now, there's literally no evidence connecting Marcella to the murders, but at one point, Roger's brother suspected her. According to him, the day before Rose and Roger were killed, Marcella unexpectedly showed up at his house and broke down crying. At this point, nothing was wrong, and she didn't know about the affair, so it led him to wonder whether she knew what was about to happen to Roger. He also suspected that she could have been involved to get the life insurance money, but again, no evidence was ever found tying Marcella to the crime, and she too has an alibi. She was babysitting in Missouri when Roger was killed, so she was ruled out. It's just sad because she was also a victim here. She went on to write a book about this entire experience, which I highly suggest reading. Suspect number 3 was the hotel bartender at the time. It's been reported that Rose may have had some type of altercation with him, but that's never 100% been confirmed. I guess this bartender lived in his truck just outside the hotel, and just one day after the murders, he up and left. Like, he completely fled, leaving behind his entire paycheck, which is weird. His truck was eventually found abandoned, but he ended up actually joining the army where he was sent off to Germany. He was only ever interviewed about this case years later when he eventually came back, and even then he seemed a bit shifty. He was even given a polygraph test, which he failed 8 times. On the 9th time, he somehow passed, which investigators said was good enough. He was never charged in connection to this crime, but The whole situation is just kind of weird. Although playing devil's advocate, if there was a brutal murder at my place of employment and the killer was never caught, I'd probably quit too. Suspect number 4 is Marcella's uncle, Charles Hatcher. There's no evidence linking him to the crime, and he was eventually cleared. But Charles was a serial killer who, at the time of the murders, had coincidentally escaped from a mental health facility in Nebraska. So weird? Yes, definitely. But he was never charged, so I don't know what to make of that. Theory number 5 is very odd. So after the gruesome nature of this crime, the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation team was brought in to assist. They sent out alerts to other states to see if any other similar crimes had been committed, and to their surprise, there was. In the years right before Roger and Rose, 2 other murders had been committed that were eerily similar. All victims had been bludgeoned to death with a similar weapon, a hatchet, and they too had been killed inside their hotel rooms. But the most disturbing similarity of all was that at each crime scene, the killer had squeezed an entire tube of toothpaste out into the bathroom. So authorities really investigated whether or not these murders were all committed by the same person. And there's a good possibility they were. But to this day, it has never been proven. To me, it seems really weird and too big of a coincidence that all 3 crime scenes involved toothpaste being squirted out. But I'm not a professional, so I don't know. And lastly, theory number 6 is that maybe someone at the Mortician Convention committed the murders. It is weird that this convention happened to be taking place in the exact same location, but I personally don't think this has anything to do with it. But I do admit, it is really weird. So now, all these years later, this case remains unsolved. Investigators reviewed it again in 2015 and re-examined all the evidence. They did this hoping to get even more DNA from the killer, and they've sent old DNA samples to numerous labs. Sadly, there has never been a match. Investigators are not losing hope though. They're just hoping that someone comes forward and does the right thing. Someone out there has to know something. There's also a Facebook page created by one of Rose's friends, and it's called Justice for Rosie. You can visit this for more information and to show your support. She is still fighting for justice all these years later. The killer may be deceased at this point because of how much time has passed, but there is still a chance that they are alive and out there somewhere. She made a promise to Rose at her funeral that she won't stop until her killer is found. Could this have been a random attack? Possibly, because they weren't even initially going to get the room because the hotel was sold out. Or could it have been someone who knew them, followed them there, and then killed them? This case is just so bizarre and really sad to me. What do you guys think? When I saw this video, I instantly thought of this case and this hotel. So many people have said that staying here in the past just felt so creepy. And now, knowing about this case, I can understand why, but it's now been 46 years. Yet whoever killed Rose and Roger and why remains a mystery.